it is possible to wake up beyond the illusion of self and still not have grown up beyond your own characterological defects. You can have a profound disidentification with your own thought and yet still act like an asshole or worse. And we've seen many cases of this, right?
Yeah.
And so I would love to dive into this a little bit more because it's one half of the pie, right? Or, potentially less, but to just pursue the disidentification with thought in this path of waking up without realizing that your characterological defects and essentially shadow material that you have not worked through will have a profound impact on people in your relationships and the outer world if you don't resolve as well.
Yeah, and also just differences in culture, right? Like becoming enlightened doesn't get you a new culture. It's like, and if you don't know anything about quantum mechanics before you become a Buddha, you're not going to know anything about quantum mechanics after you become a Buddha. I mean, leaving aside what people believe about the powers of a Buddha, and there's just the fact that there can be quite a distance in time between having genuine insight in what I'm talking about here, selflessness or non-duality, and truly stabilizing that insight so that you never overlook it again, right? So, I mean, for me, I make no pretense of being fully enlightened or a Buddha or like at the end of this project, right? Like I try to be rigorously honest about just what I can authenticate as a matter of my direct experience, what is plausible to me to believe in on the basis of what I know or think I know, and what it's pretty clear to me I'm not experiencing or haven't experienced. And so, I still definitely get lost in thought, right? The dream reasserts itself. Now, what it's like to wake up from the dream is different than it's different than it would be if I were practicing dualistically, right? Like when you're practicing mindfulness dualistically, you get lost in thought and you notice it. And then let's say you come back, let's say you're meditating on the breath, you come back to the breath, that there's still a lot of power in that. I mean, just the learning to exercise this particular muscle of just getting distracted and then recognizing it and then no longer being distracted, coming back to the breath or coming back to sounds or anything you can notice. Even dualistically, that allows you to unhook from the emotional and behavioral implications of any one of those thoughts, right? So if it's a thought of anger and you notice it, and then you come back to just breathing, that gives you a degree of freedom that most people don't have. I mean, most people are just angry from that moment on, and they're just going to say or do whatever they do on that basis. They see no alternative but to feel identical to their thoughts. But if you're doing this dualistically, it seems like the sense of self is maintained throughout that whole process. Like I feel angry, and then, I'm supposed to be meditating. Why did okay, back to the breath. But the meditator has been preserved. Like it's still me in here meditating, making an effort. Once you have really broken the spell and can practice in a non-dual way, the moment you notice the thought, the moment you notice you've become angry and the dreamscape of thought has captured you, not only does the thought just unravel the way all thoughts do? I mean, it's amazing that thoughts do anything at all to push us around, because I mean, when you actually look at them, they're these just the most gossamer, bits of language or imagery. I mean, there's nothing there really. So the thoughts unravel whether you're looking at them dualistically or not, or non-dualistically. But the moment you recognize a thought as a thought, coincident with that recognition, you notice there's no one recognizing it. I mean, there's no center to consciousness. It's just consciousness and its contents. And there's freedom in that, right? So you're not left with the problem of, okay, I better get the fuck back to the breath because this is a long project, right? Like I've been on this retreat for a week and this is still happening. I'm getting angry. What is, like, now I'm thinking again, what the, like that. So like, it's that iteration just perpetually feels like a problem that proves you're unenlightened and far from your goal, as you put it at the outset, right? And yet, when you can practice non-dualistically, you recognize that the goal is already here. You can in Dzogchen terminology, you can take the goal as the path. Like your next moment of path is enjoying the freedom of non-duality in that moment. Maybe only for a moment, right? So the crucial point here, though, is that even if you're practicing non-dualistically, you're still unless you're some adept or prodigy who, the moment you break through for the first time, you're done. You're stable for the rest of your life. You're still going to be fluctuating between enjoying consciousness as it is without distraction and being lost in the dreamscape of thought, right? And because you're still going to be caught by thought, it matters what kinds of thoughts you have, right? Because you're going to be doing something on the basis of those thoughts. You're going to be saying something. You're going to be captivated by something. You're going to be wanting something. And if you're a guru who really wants to have sex with his prettiest students, that's who you're going to be, right? Like you could be punctuating that with genuine insights into non-duality. But if you don't have an ethic, if you've come from a culture where that's actually not even a bad thing, like that's just tantra, right? You're just, of course, you could have sex with anyone you want. You're the guru, right? You're like that. If you come from a theocracy and there's no HR department who's going to say, hey, listen, actually, it's not a great thing to be. I mean, some of these students are married. There's a power differential here. Like there's a lot of projection going on. This is unfair. This is ethically unwise. This is you're actually, and in each one of those moments, you're being a selfish asshole and you're not recognizing it because you don't have that much mindfulness. You're not going to see the problem, and yes, we have lived with the consequences of that in many spiritual communities. Many gurus who were not actually frauds in the normal sense have behaved terribly with their students because they became rock stars in a very isolated community and gratified their desires, their still extant desires on that basis, right? I mean, just think of how tempting it is to be. I mean, basically, you're like you're John Bon Jovi, but you're on an island of people who are projecting all of their spiritual hopes and fears onto you, right? It's like you're a rock star with power, right? It's ridiculous, and most egos in that situation don't handle it very well, right? So it's not especially mysterious that spiritual teachers misbehave. And it's also not mysterious that even people with genuine spiritual insights can misbehave in those ways because they're getting lost in thought much of the time because they're not fully done with this process of recognizing the nature of consciousness. And as to whether anyone I'm not sure I've met anyone who's totally fulfilled the process. I've certainly met people who have claimed to have done so, but and I've met people who I felt were further along than I was, and were very inspiring to me on that basis. But no, I think it's important to recognize that on some level, spiritual insight and even non-duality isn't enough to get us everything we want and are right to want in this world. I mean, it's not enough, a bunch of enlightened Buddhas even is not enough to help us build a civilization that really works, right? There's just a tremendous amount of knowledge that we want that you don't get by just meditating more, even correctly on the nature of emptiness. I mean, you don't spontaneously understand how to improve an economy, right, or a medical system, or to engineer airplanes so that they crash less and less and less, and ultimately don't crash at all, right? It's like that's all a matter of very specific forms of iterative knowledge acquisition that perfectly unenlightened people are qualified to do, right? Like this is the whole project. These projects are orthogonal to one another. We want good aircraft engineers and we want Buddhas, and occasionally you might want, if you're an aircraft engineer, it might be nice to be a Buddha. If you're a Buddha, you probably don't care about being an aircraft engineer, but we need both, and they are different projects. And the crucial piece for your question with respect to the ethics is ethics has a lot in common with aircraft engineering and is not fully captured by the project of just recognizing the self as an illusion, right? Because especially in this interval of where you're still just working out the consequences for yourself of this insight, right? And you're not fully stable, because if you're not fully stable, all you have are ideas and thoughts and culture with which to manifest. And if you have a culture that just hasn't figured out certain core ethical principles, as many cultures haven't, it's like when Punjaji had to get his had to find his niece a husband, in India. He had no brighter idea about how to go about doing that than to put, to take out, a classified ad with her picture in it, strategically lightened to make her look more light-skinned than she was, because that's valuable in Indian culture, right? Racism is the wrong concept, I guess, but there's some version of bias, prejudice against dark skin, even within Indian culture, that's a completely rational marketing tool for his niece, to find a husband. This is what the Buddha's, the self-proclaimed enlightened adept is doing to get to find a husband for his niece. Okay, is that the optimal way to solve this social problem of how do you get young people together to have satisfying marriages? I doubt it, right? It's like he didn't have, by virtue of being the most blissed out and wise and compassionate person I had ever met at that point, he had exactly zero insight into how to solve this kind of social problem. There's just more. You need more than just the deliverance of your own personal freedom.